we are getting besides the point because we're here to talk about a very important movie today.
A very important movie.
A very important movie. And that movie is Parasite. Now, we briefly discussed this over text, but for people who have not seen Parasite yet, it is currently the #1 highest rated narrative feature movie on Letterboxd. Which blows my mind.
What did I say it was on IMDb?
It was like 20-something? 21, maybe?
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up real quick.
Which, I mean, I understand there's a recency bias, and I obviously don't think it's the best narrative feature of all time. But it blows my mind because, A, it's like a foreign movie. And I know, obviously, there's a lot of foreign classics that are generally wider accepted, widely accepted into more mainstream audiences, but I never would have expected it to be this one. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the comedian Tom Segura. He's a pretty decently popular comedian.
Not familiar.
Kind of like a kind of a dad comedian. Not really, okay, but kind of a dad comedian. And I was scrolling through Instagram the other day, and he posted a picture of the poster from Parasite saying, "Go see this movie." And I was just like, wow, this really is crossing over into the mainstream, unlike any foreign movie of the past decade, maybe. And I can't pinpoint why it is.
우리 다송이는 완전 예술가 재질인데.
침팬지를 그린 거죠?
자화상이에요.
역시.
Well, we'll get into that. So, with IMDb, it was yesterday at 3 o'clock, it was at 21.
Okay.
I don't see it getting off of that list.
I don't see it getting off either. Because his other movies are decently high, ratings-wise.
Joker has moved down too, so...
Well, okay, yeah.
The recency bias is starting to kick down a notch.
Well, you gotta think about Joker for more than 2 minutes before you bump down some ratings. Not necessarily... It's a word I don't use often because I feel it is often misused, but the only thing that comes to my mind is pretentious with that movie. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Parasite.
Yeah.
Alright, so I'm just gonna let you start because I have a feeling you liked it a lot.
I am really glad that we have made this a thing where we don't tell each other what we think.
Yeah.
Or we try not to as much as possible. Because I have just been happily sitting on not rating it on Letterboxd, not saying anything. I mean, there's some things through like implied conversations we've had that I like it. Obviously, well, doesn't matter. Parasite was everything I ever wanted from a theater experience and more.
It is a fantastic theater experience. That much is for certain.
You know, I had watched the trailer.
Oh, I know you have.
All three of them. I had watched all three trailers multiple times, every day, for 2 months.
Now, how would you say it compares with your watching of the Uncut Gems trailer?
It doesn't even compare.
Okay.
Nothing comes... I think if you were to lump all three trailers together, the only thing that I think I might have watched more on YouTube is the trailer for Burning.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
I still watch that every once in a while, just to...
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but... Oh, okay, well, quick side note. You know it's my most watched trailer by far?
Was it The Lighthouse?
No, but that was close. I still watch at least once a week the Under the Silver Lake trailer. I love that trailer so much.
Really?
But yeah, I do. But
I know you love the movie so much.
Well, it was one of those... Okay, the way that you feel about Parasite, where you saw the trailer and you knew before you even saw the movie, this is going to be one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
That's exactly how I felt about Under the Silver Lake. Everything I wanted in a movie was in Under the Silver Lake, and I saw the trailer, and I was very excited. But the thing is, you waited a few months. I waited 1.5 years.
Here's the thing. It's so magical when you watch a trailer, and it delivers 100% of what you want.
If anything, it hides so much.
It does.
Because I don't know how much you knew about the movie before you went into it. I unfortunately knew from a few reviewers that there was an unexpected twist in the middle.
Well, from the first trailer.
Yeah.
It says that you think it's one thing and then it shifts to another.
Well, yeah. I went in knowing that I didn't know where it was going to go, but I never could have possibly predicted where it was going.
It's impossible to predict what's going to
really
happen.
Is. It is just... It's one of those rare movies where every little aspect of filmmaking is just firing on all cylinders. Everything about this movie.
It was joyous to watch it. And I get giddy just thinking about it.
Okay, so quick. I want to see if we have the same favorite moment in the movie.
Okay. Because there's so many of them.
There is, but there's one moment I consider my favorite. It might be one of my favorite movie moments ever.
I'm trying. The movie is just streaming by in my mind of like, I'm thinking of all the great stuff, and I'm like, but there's more great stuff, and what am I not thinking of?
That's the thing. Okay, so maybe it's just the way that I saw it, but this one particular moment I saw, and I did a single like weird clap and leaned forward and had a look on my face of fear, laughter, curiosity, every fear, every emotion that could be experienced by a human, I felt in one moment. And for me, that moment was the reveal of the quote-unquote ghost.
Oh.
It was just... because that character is so weird. Everything about him, the way he talks, the way he looks, his whole existence, and we get to know him in just the weirdest circumstances.
Hasn't he played like a serial killer before in South Korea? I feel like that's what he's just typecast as.
I have no idea, but the fact that they were bringing back, because obviously they make a big point in the beginning of the movie when Jessica talks about the kid's past traumas. So I'm like, okay, where's this going? I'm thinking something crazy, and it is crazy, but just not at all what I was expecting. Just the way he looks at him. The way he looks at him is so terrifying.
It kind of... Did he have...
Oh my god.
I tried to figure it out. Did he have like... Was there something up with his eyes? Like, I felt like there were googly eyes or something, or like he's opening them really wide.
They were just buggy.
And it was...
Well,
because that's what got me.
I feel like, eyes in general are kind of the most... They definitely have the capacity for displaying the most personality of any feature on the face. But there's just something about the way that guy looks that completely sold him being in this basement forever, however many years.
Oh, spoiler alert, by the way. Let's just get that out of the way. Cause
you should probably put a little something at the beginning of this saying it's a spoiler discussion. Because there's no real way to talk about this movie without spoiling it. Because it is...
Hey Chandler? Could you do me a favor and just shout into your microphone, "Go see Parasite," and that'll be the opening? I'll put that in the beginning.
Go see Parasite! I'm not going to shout, but I'll be louder.
I'm sure it peaked, and that's perfect.
Oh, it peaked hard as far as audacity is concerned. But yeah, that guy, there's never a moment where I didn't believe that he had gone that crazy. Like, obviously his actions are kind of insane, and I would, I feel like with any other actor, you would be kind of you'd be like, okay, the basement thing is definitely an excuse to get a crazy guy in this narrative. But nope, he sells it so well. He is just so unsettling, and then they display him in the most unsettling way.
So with the whole, the eye thing with him rising out of the basement, I think could be a little reference to a French film, Les Diaboliques, The Devils. And in that, there's a scene where a dead guy who's not really dead has like fake eyes in.
Oh, God.
That look very similar. And he rises out of a bathtub to scare someone.
Oh.
And it felt like a very similar kind of premise of like someone with like weird googly eyes rising out of something and someone getting scared. Petrified scared afterwards. Could just be a coincidence, but it reminded me of that moment.
Well,
Good movie, by the way.
Yeah, well...
The Devils.
Have you also considered it could be a reference to the classic sci-fi film Killers from Space?
You know what? It really could be. Those little googly eye aliens, they're great.
Horrible. But yeah, that was the moment that I was just like, whoa. But the craziest part to me, like I said, where every part of this movie is like, you know, amazing. The part that jumps out to me the most is the script, because obviously, you know, a big part of the marketing push has been, you don't know where it's going. It takes a turn or whatever. It's crazy because I think anyone who sees it can pinpoint the exact moment it takes that turn.
Oh, yes.
And that's when the old housekeeper shows up.
And I think you could ask every single person that goes into the movie not knowing, like knowing there's a twist, but not knowing what the twist is. You could ask them, what do you think the twist is? Like 5 minutes before it happens, what do you think's going to go wrong here? And no one would get it right.
They really wouldn't.
It's really so good at obscuring what's going to happen. And yet it works perfectly. Like it's completely set up.
No, you would definitely not be able to get that twist. And the thing is, okay, so my favorite part of this entire movie, besides that one moment, I think from the moment that twist is revealed, like the next 20 or so minutes, where it's just these two different families trying to hide from the third family, it's my favorite part in the movie, my favorite like sequence in the movie, and it might be like some of my favorite 20 minutes of any movie ever.
I've just had the biggest grin on my face since we started this discussion. And the more we talk about it and the more I think about it, I wasn't like a reactionary, and I know I told you I didn't put Parasite on my favorite movies of all time list.
But you were thinking about it before you even went in.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. And then afterwards I was like, that was great, but I don't think it deserves to be on there. And over the course of this conversation, I think I'm getting ready to put it on there.
It is just there really is not anything like it.
There's not anything like it. There's no major issues with it.
There's no stones left unturned. There are no underdeveloped ideas. There's no underdeveloped visuals. Everyone who's in it is great.
I have one small, not even a complaint, but I think something they could have done a little better. But that's the only thing. And the thing is, so the whole thing, the ending is Mr. Kim is in the basement. Yeah. And his son is, you know, writing this emotional letter about how he plans to get him out of there. And then it cuts back to him. And I felt that the father-son relationship could have been slightly more emphasized in the very beginning. Yeah. And that's it. That's the only thing I think that could have been better.
They do have that moment in the gym, you know, the little bonding moment. And I do think that's a great line where the father basically says, don't ever make a plan, because when you make a plan, it doesn't turn out that way. And it ends with the son saying that he's making a plan to get his father out.
I think this film is really about the benefits of proper planning. You gotta make a good plan, because if you don't make a plan, your family might die.
Well, as long as we're talking issues, the only major issue I had, which isn't really that big, the scene where the crazy guy in the basement comes out and slams the rock into the son's head. I think the emphasis on that scene and the brutality of it is deliberately meant to make you think that the son is dead. I kind of felt that the son surviving that, especially us showing that one scene, was kind of misleading in a way that doesn't necessarily feel like a surprise so much as a cheap subversion. But other than that, it was definitely a moment in the theater where everyone just kind of cringed.
Oh, I was going to ask you, because both times I saw it, it was just a collective gasp from the audience.
Okay, both times I saw it, there were a few moments where the audience kind of went nuts.
I'm just going to say this. Yeah. Best theater experience I've had in a long time.
It's definitely one of
the audience too. Is just in tune with the film. They're laughing, and you're having a good time with other people enjoying a movie.
Well, here's the thing about Parasite, especially, is that, you know, there's a few people in my showing of The Lighthouse that weren't all into it. Well, no, not The Lighthouse. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Because, the marketing makes it seem a certain way, and it kind of really isn't the way that it's marketed. But with movies like The Lighthouse and Parasite, there are elements that cannot be disguised, like the black and white, 3 aspect ratio of The Lighthouse.
Yeah.
People will see that in the trailer, and if you don't like black and white movies, you're not going to show up. So you have a very specific audience that already is pre-sold on the aesthetics that would be more inclined to accept certain parts of the movie that are a little more abstract. With Parasite as well, the fact that it is a Korean movie, all the trailers are in Korean, the fact that is sort of like a shield to most people that wouldn't go and seek out this movie. So everyone who was in the theater when I saw it both times were on board from the start. And that's the best theater. That is the best theater experience when you have no one who is actively fighting against the movie.
Here's the thing. In my theater, the second time I went, there were some people that during the trailers were being quite noisy. And I was getting a little worried. And there still was like a low murmur and like candy wrappers crinkling during like the opening titles. And then it like quieted down. And I think it might not even be that we're getting to the point in its release where it's been out long enough that it's no longer just the people who were initially sold on Korean film, Bong Joon Ho, Palme d'Or.
Yeah. Well, because now it has a huge, reputation.
Yeah.
Not only from, the Cannes performance, but now that it's hit wider audiences and everybody else is gushing over it, there's a lot more people going to see it.
I can see this being a thing where it's in theaters for a bit to come, specifically because of award season, and it's going to get more buzz then, even if it's just for the Oscar for Best Foreign Film.
Yeah.
It will continue to perform well.
Oh, yeah. Here's what I want to know, because obviously last year Roma had the double categories of foreign and best picture.
Yeah.
I wonder if Parasite's going to be the same.
I hope it gets nominated for best picture.
Yes. I haven't seen too many foreign movies this year. A lot of the time when foreign movies are nominated, foreign movies don't come to the US until much later. So I can't necessarily say that there's any out there that are better or worse, but this is another level of good that it is it's hard to even call it really a foreign movie. Because I think a lot of what makes this movie so great, and it's what is helping it to respond, or helping audiences to respond, is that I feel like there's this weird stigma around foreign movies that they're a lot more internal with their conflict, that they're a lot more heady, so to speak. But this movie is this is a thriller. It's even just calling it a thriller seems like a cheap way of categorizing
it's a comedy
because
thriller.
It is so many things. It is. It really
That's
is.
That's the simplest way of describing it. It's a bit more, but it is that. That's the most concrete way of putting it in a genre terms.
Well, yeah. Part of me, there's a bunch of people that when I saw it referred to it as the darkest spin-off of Home Alone you can make. Because there are some elements of that kind of humor, but I think the whole movie itself, despite being a foreign movie, and even if you go in with that stigma, the movie is thoroughly entertaining.
Yeah.
From pretty much the start.
Well, I took my my friend, the other Jacob, who coincidentally has my name, and he's not a film buff whatsoever, and oftentimes he comes over and I'm watching boring foreign films.
Quote unquote boring.
Some of them are boring, but I quite like that sometimes.
But you get some experience out of it.
And he comes over and it's just what are you watching? He's not into it whatsoever. And I took him, I forced him to go see it with me the second time I watched it on Sunday, and he loved it. So
that's the exact same thing I'm trying to do with my brother. Because my brother is not necessarily resistant to foreign movies. There's a few that I've shown him that he's really liked, but a lot of them, I feel like you kind of have to have a sort of background in filmmaking and film theory to appreciate a lot of works by, like, you know, Bergman and stuff like that.
Sure.
Obviously, you can get something out of it, but you'll get a lot more knowing a lot more. But this is a movie that you can go in, even if you hate subtitles, you can go into this movie and still think it's pretty great.
It is I don't know if you know this, but it is now the highest grossing foreign language Palme d'Or winner of all time.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that. What is the highest grossing Palme d'Or winner in general?
I don't know.
Okay. I am very excited.
Pulp Fiction, maybe?
Oh,
that's just a guess.
Makes sense.
I think Apocalypse Now also was Palme d'Or.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. There's some big ones in there.
It's one of those movies that it's been a while since there's been a movie like this that I just want to take everybody I know to go see it.
So here's the thing with Korean cinema. And I talked a bit about this on Nick's podcast, Nothing with Nick Johnson. Shout out. When I was on there, we talked a bit, because we were anticipating this movie, and I talked a bit about how South Korean cinema is currently the most accessible foreign market cinema
it really
in
is.
the world. Because the movies that are coming out of South Korea now, it's kind of like, you know how in the 60s and 70s you had all these films like The Godfather and The Graduate and these super critically acclaimed films that were also some of the highest grossing movies of the year, where those were the decades that we were hitting the sweet spot of critical acclaim and audience appeal. That's where South Korea is at right now. The critically acclaimed stuff that's coming out of that country
is some of the best.
Is all they're thrillers and horror films and incredibly audience friendly movies, and it's great to see that kind of stuff when a country can put out that kind of movie.
Oh yeah,
because you think of like some of the best Korean films like Old Boy or The Handmaiden or any of Bong Joon Ho's stuff. They're not artsy films, not by a long shot.
So. There's a level of art.
No, they are artfully made films, but they're not artsy films.
They're not art house films in the traditional sense. Yeah.
And this is like peak that.
I agree.
This is peak art, the art of cinema meeting audience appeal.
And what really appeals to me as far as South Korean movies go is that there is this really weird darkness to a lot of them. Like some of what I feel like the greatest hits of South Korea are like, especially compared to the 60s and 70s run you were talking about, are just a lot darker. Even in like peak 70s dirt grime, you wouldn't have an ending like Old Boy's ending.
No.
Or a twist like Old Boy's twist. I don't know what it is about South Korean culture. Maybe it's their history being under the nuclear gaze of North Korea and the imminent threat of being blown up at a moment's notice. But they have some dark obsessions.
I have yet to. I need to watch more Korean movies, and I will admit that I haven't seen too many, but the ones that I have seen, I have yet to watch one that is normal, of like that doesn't have something really dark at its core. And I'm thinking of the Lee Chang-dong movie Poetry. That's the closest I've gotten to like just a normal drama. But even that is, like, at its core, got something dark and fishy going on underneath the surface.
I think the most normal one I've seen so far is this movie I told you about called, like, When He Arrives or something like that, where it's literally just like an 80-minute movie about this young film professor who goes back to his college town and just interacts with a bunch of people, but the longer it goes on, the sadder it is. It just reminded me a lot of 8.5, but with none of the fantastical elements. Like 8.5 meets Inside Llewyn Davis, because it's also black and white and also has a lot of snow and wind. I think you'd really like it. But yeah, there's definitely this weird obsession South Korea has with the dark, but I am very much here for it.
I'm here for it.
I think one of the most interesting things about the movie, also is definitely the design. I think the rich house is incredible.
Let me buy that house. Let me just say that. That's
it's weird because there's very few houses in movies, like locations, buildings and such, that you like explore the same way you do with this one.
There's I think there's a strong correlation between a good movie and a movie that takes the time to explore the location that it's set in.
Yeah.
I'm like, think about something like I don't know why this was the first thing that came to mind, like The Godfather. I'm thinking of the hospital sequence. And I can remember what that hospital looks like to an absurd degree. It's not even that in the film all that much, but it is a memorable location. I think there's a strong correlation between making your locations memorable and making them spatially recognizable, as like you have a spatial awareness. Like when a film goes to the trouble of creating a strong sense of spatial awareness in its audience, it's typically a good movie. And this does it to a perfect degree.
Yeah, it's like it goes even further than the hospital, because I could literally I know where stuff is in that house.
I could draw a floor plan for you.
I know every part of that house. And the weird part is that it's very nice, but it's not necessarily the biggest house. But every room is so prominently featured and well shot and well designed that it's just one of the best movie houses ever. And not even that, but the relation it has to their apartment. Mm-hmm. Because obviously both of them, one is definitely above ground, one's below ground. They both have this prominent centerpiece being this giant window. One of them, the window is facing out towards the alley where we see drunkards piss on street signs. The other one is this big window where you see the beautiful green grass and the trees behind it. It's this sort of duality between the two locations that I think definitely makes them both a lot more interesting.
So this is a connection that I've seen other people make before, but also I thought a lot about it was Akira Kurosawa's High and Low. Of like, that film is all about the spatial difference between the rich and the poor. You got Gondo's house up on the hill, and then you got the kidnapper's house down below in kind of the slums and everything.
They also have two very distinct halves.
Yes, both are half movies, where this one is, the first half is infiltrating the house and the second half is the fallout.
Well, Parasite definitely has a lot more connection between the two halves than High and Low, but it's still a half movie. Yeah,
because as soon as that doorbell rings, you've entered into a new world.
Fun times are over.
Well, fun times are over for the characters.
A different shade of fun times.
The audience is having fun.
Yeah.
I'm practically speechless when I'm thinking about some parts of this movie. And one of the things about how it's on the top of the Letterboxd list, it's quite high on the IMDb list, and the way that I think people should be thinking about that, because there's probably going to be some backlash about that, of like, oh well, it's not that good. And I'm like, yes, but those lists.
The fact that it has jumped to the top narrative movie, it's definitely going to have those people who go into it thinking, oh well, let's see the greatest movie of all time. And then they're going to come out thinking, okay, that wasn't the greatest movie of all time. So they'll immediately have a reactionary review. But I'm not going to say it's it's not my favorite movie of all time.
Well,
but
not mine either.
Is it like a pretty perfect movie? I mean, yeah, I think so.
Well, the thing with those lists is they're not proclaiming that those are the best movies ever made. Yeah. What they're doing is they are saying these are the most likable movies ever made. And
yes,
the higher a movie is on those lists, the more likely you are to like it when going into it. It has nothing to do with quality or anything, merely likability. Yeah. And with that understanding, you go into Parasite and don't think of it as like the greatest movie ever made. Think of it as one of the most enjoyable movies ever made. because it most certainly is that.
It really is. I feel like one part that we're failing to talk about is just how hilarious this movie is.
It's the funniest thing I've seen all year. I haven't seen that many comedies, to be fair, but
I quite enjoyed Booksmart. I also thought that was funny.
I should watch Booksmart.
Booksmart's great. It's also really well directed, but that's besides the point. One of the funniest parts in the whole movie to me, besides the ghost, quote unquote, would be the sort of the scene that's accompanied by the classic music when they're trying to frame the housekeeper. The look that Song Kang-ho gives when he pulls that bloody
and then the wife,
out of the
and
trash.
she's just like, like she's gonna faint.
Yes. Okay, now here's my question. Who do you think has the best performance in this thing? I'm a biased Song Kang-ho fan, but I do think he steals the show.
Obviously he's great. But I think, let me pull up, at least attempt some of these actors' names.
I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to refer to them as they are in the movie.
As their names, yeah. I think the wife, Mrs. Park, did a great job.
Oh, she's great.
I also think that Jessica was amazing.
She was a lot of fun. That's the thing is that there's not a single bad performance.
No, there's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with the movie.
No, there's
some things you could wish it could have done a little better.
Yeah.
But nothing you can say, that was not good.
Yeah. I definitely, now that you bring it up, it's a tie between the Song Kang-ho, the father, and Mrs. Park.
Mrs. Park was the funniest part.
Mrs. Park was so wonderfully ditzy in a way that really was kind of absurd at points, but never went over the top.
Well, the whole movie is partially absurd.
It's very absurd. Okay, but also, what about the guy in the basement?
Well, the guy in the basement, he's just being himself, I feel. He can just look at the camera normally, and he looks insane.
Every time there's a stillness and a silentness to the room, just the voice in the back of my head just goes, "Respect!" And then I hear him slam his head against the light.
The way he eats the banana.
Oh my god.
That's so weird.
It is.
He's like an anaconda just swallowing his prey whole.
I know I said the funniest moment. It's a tie between the ghost and Song Kang-ho pulling the tissue out of the trash, but also can I just say how hilarious it was when the housekeeper got kicked down the stairs. That's another part in the movie where the entire audience went, "Oh no." Then I realized at that moment, okay, we're all laughing like children of this woman getting murdered in one of the most horribly brutal ways.
Well, what? God damn it. I had like a train of thought of like, oh, that was really great. I wanted to talk to Chandler about that. And then it
there's so much
disappeared.
Of it, though.
It disappeared.
I almost feel like this should be... At this point, we're like...
This is fine. It'll be a longer episode. Who cares?
It'll be a longer episode.
Well, there's also a lot to cut out. A lot to cut out.
That is true.
But the wait 1 second. Yeah, it's gone. Completely gone.
Okay, so I've seen it twice now. Mm-hmm. And even the second time, the last 10 or 15 minutes of the movie, the birthday party. The birthday party towards the end. Even when I already saw it, that part is just so horribly tense.
It really is. Especially when Kevin goes down to the basement.
Oh, and he drops the rock?
That's when it begins.
When
you're just collective, you can't breathe until the ending of that sequence.
It really, and just thinking about it now, I'm getting the chills because he drops the rock, and I'm so glad. Okay, I am glad because my whole thing with jump scares is that when you're expecting them, they're not effective. Mm-hmm. And that whole time I was expecting a jump scare, and it definitely would have been a good one. But I love the fact that we just sort of see him loom over it, because that itself is scary enough. Anything over that is sort of almost overly scary.
You could feel the terror in the audience when he's approaching the old housekeeper as she's just dead there.
Yeah.
And you see the wire come over his head, and it's like he's your main character. You love him. You love Kevin so much. You don't want him to die. And it's horrifying when you see that the wire come up because you know it's coming. It's such great suspense.
But yeah, that whole sequence.
And then one of the editing in this movie is impeccable. And one of my favorite
I'm telling you,
cuts,
every part of it is.
One of my favorite cuts is Kevin's running up the stairs and he gets caught, and the basement guy hits him in the head with the rock.
Uh-huh.
And then it just cuts to outside to the lady singing opera. And I don't know what works so well about that cut in my brain, but just the jarringness of that, like going from sheer horror to like this fancy garden party and this woman singing. It was great.
Agreed. The editing is fantastic, and I want to point out that this it does have another aspect going for it that has, is one of the necessities to be a Jacob Kaufman film, and it is some pretty amazing shots of food. Specifically that little rice dish they make as the family is coming home for the camping trip.
That looked good. The cake.
It looked amazing.
The trauma cake looked great.
Oh, the trauma and the blood hitting the trauma cake. Yes, I agree. Yeah. It has everything. It truly has everything.
Let me mention something that I don't think was getting enough love, as soon as I watched it, I went onto YouTube and the internet and looked at every review possible. And the one thing I don't think is getting enough love is I think that the soundtrack is one of the best of the year.
Soundtrack?
The music, the score.
The score is good. Yes.
No. It's not good. It's great.
I've
listened to it 3 times, and
really,
yeah,
interesting.
Listen to it. It's really.
I'll have to listen to it because I judge a score on how well it takes me back into the movie when I listen to it outside of the movie, and I definitely remember the actual string sections being very effective. Really good use of it, especially during the peach poisoning scene,
and the drums, the drum roll in that scene too.
Oh yeah. There's
the two best parts of the soundtrack for me were the opening, the kind of simple little piano tune, and one of the things I noticed with the soundtrack is that it begins with just piano, and then the closer you get to the park residence, the more it comes on in with these bells and these strings, and kind of it morphs into that eventually.
See, I didn't even notice that.
And it's just the score is fun to listen to. And then the other one was the soundtrack. It's called The Hellgate, which is when they go into the basement for the first time. And that's a really effective piece of music.
It is, because that itself, I think the tensest moment in the movie for me is definitely when the son goes to the basement towards the end. But that moment when the housekeeper shows up again, the actual halfway point, that is where I think everyone in the audience at the same time was like, wait, what? Because at that point, I don't know if there's a single person, like you said, who legitimately could have figured out where it was going.
I just remember the first time watching when you go down in the basement with the mother and you see her pushing against the thing, the door, the false door, and it's hilarious. It's just
it's hilarious, but it's so desperate too.
It is. And then
there's something that is panicking about that.
It's both panicking and funny at the same time. It's morphing into the tone shift. And then they open it up and she opens the door, and there's just, I remember this kind of palpable sense of, oh my God, I don't know what is happening. I love it, and I'm also terrified. What is down there? And then she screams, I think she screams honey or something.
Yeah.
And you're like, what the hell?
The That's the thing, is that's why this movie is so great. Another reason is that this movie does so many different tones and genres, and you would think on paper that it sounds terrible, just the way that he's going to all these different places, but he goes to all these different places so well and so organically that, like, this movie is simultaneously the funniest and scariest movie I've seen all year. And I think that alone is a feat in itself, but I'm not going to say it's the greatest narrative feature of all time, but I think it definitely deserves the hype it's getting.
It deserves the hype, and I think it, for me personally, I think it deserves to be on that list.
Oh, definitely deserves to be on that list. It's just a matter of where.
Because I'm thinking about it, and I don't, like, I think about other movies, and I'm like, that's good and all, but Parasite. And I can see the argument for it being one of the best ever made.
It's really hard to decide best movie ever made. I feel like history has to have its way with it before you can make that assumption. But I don't see any way that this movie can possibly age poorly.
I was trying to think about it last night. Like, I was trying to get to bed, and I was just thinking, was I being too... Like, was I getting on the Bong train too much? I just kept thinking about it. Like, what could possibly be wrong with it?
I mean, there's obviously things that people can cite as weaker aspects of it, but I don't think he did anything wrong.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if any of it could age poorly.
Oh, no. Because this thing, like, all the things that do age a movie, like technology, culture references, stuff like that,
sexism,
slang, sexism, there's not really any of that here. All of the stuff like that is vague enough to where it can work, just as not only as like a relic of its time, but just, would work in the future.
It also is foreign, so it has a bit of, particularly for American audiences, it has a bit of distance. Because like when I watch a foreign, like last year at Marienbad, it doesn't seem dated. It's already different, so you don't notice its datedness at all. I
don't know how I can possibly say at this point, one of the best movies ever made. I can definitely say it deserves the top space. It deserves to run with the big dogs as far as South Korean films go. And that much is apparent from just from the first year alone. It's operating on the same.
You are a big fan of Memories of Murder.
I am.
That's still your favorite?
Yeah, I still like Memories of Murder a little bit more. But I got a huge bias because I'm a huge true crime fan, and I honestly think that Memories of Murder is quite possibly the best true crime / serial killer movie ever made. And, as much as I love Parasite, how many drop kicks does Parasite have?
Yeah.
There's no drop kicks.
No, but it is funnier.
It is definitely funnier.
In different ways. Drop kicks are funny, but...
I will never forget just the reaction I had to just the first Memories of Murder drop kick, where Song Kang-ho just kicks that guy down the grassy hill.
I feel like Bong Joon Ho had the opportunity a few times to do a drop kick. Like when they're the guy peeing outside their house.
100%. That's what I was waiting for.
He was an easy drop kick target.
I was waiting for the drop kick. Or even, definitely wouldn't work in that scene, but part of me did want to see that housekeeper get drop kicked down the stairs. That would have added just another layer of comedy to that entirely horrible sequence.
You mean wonderful sequence?
Well, yeah, wonderfully just terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of South Korean films, speaking from a purely objective standpoint, I do think this is one of, certainly one of the best of the year, and quite probably one of the best ever made. I do still have a great affection for Burning, and that's still my favorite South Korean film.
Yeah, Burning definitely is its own experience. That's what I love so much about these South Korean movies, is that a lot of them, they're very different from each other. They come from the same twisted place. They have a lot of the same comedic sensibilities, but they're all very different. And Burning, Parasite, Oldboy, those are all movies. Well, maybe not so much Oldboy, but Parasite and Burning are definitely movies that there really is nothing else like them.
And I am thankful for that.
아, 잠깐. 제시카, 외동딸, 일리노이, 시카고. 과선배는 김진모, 그는 이사촌.